This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. That is Romans 13, 1 through 3. Guys, we got a lot of ground to cover today, and I don't know what's going on in the air in Oklahoma right now, but everything inside of my voice box is a little dry, so we'll do our best to get through today's episode. But did want to remind you guys about the Church 1122 Men's Conference, and I just heard yesterday there's like 20 tickets available, and that's a 3,000 seat venue, okay? So there's 20-ish tickets available, and then everything's going to be overflow after that. So guys, if you were listening to this right now, you may be getting one of the final tickets for the Church of 1122 Men's Conference in Jacksonville, Florida on October the 17th and 18th. The speakers are Joby Martin, Jeff Foxworthy, Willie Robertson, John Tyson, Brian Laritz, and yours truly. I'm going to be a part of two sessions on Saturday morning. It's not going to be good. Saturday morning, the 18th, I will be a part of two sessions. Guys, this will sell out. Go to the show notes. Get your tickets. As always, we're super thankful for our donors. If you've not left us a 5-star review, 4 and below, just move on with your life. But a 5-star review and share this around with a friend, please go ahead and do that. But today, guys, we are continuing the Quick Hitters clean out, and we've got a huge subject matter that we're going to be talking about before we even get to the Quick Hitters. But in the Quick Hitters, we're going to talk about Israel attacking Iran, Simone Biles getting dragged for going after Riley Gaines, Hamas murdering humanitarian aid workers, Democrats spending $20 million to try and understand young male Americans, and then we got a little bit of a Major League Baseball section, Clayton Kershaw silent protests against Pride Month, former MLB pitcher Trevor Bauer winning his defamation lawsuit against a woman that accused him of rape, Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson being reinstated into the Major League Baseball, and then Michael Tait of Newsboys confessing to being an alcoholic, druggy, homosexual. Yeah, so tons of fun. But I've got to get this quick hitter out of the way right now. I'm going to be doing a quick hitter right now because it's just been burning a hole in my soul since I found out about it. So this is, guys, this is legitimately one of the most awful stories that I've ever heard. And I know on the show, I'm here to equip men to push back darkness, so I have to wade into some pretty dark waters and expose myself to some pretty dark content so that I can help you guys recognize it and recognize ways that you can push back. And guys, if this doesn't impact you, if this story doesn't impact you, then I'd check your pulse, right? Because I'm just not sure you're alive. But this is according to the UK Mirror on June the 13th. A man has been charged with murder, sexual assault, and child cruelty offenses after the death of a baby boy. Jamie Varley, 36, will appear at Lancaster Magistrates Court today, charged with the murder of a 13-month-old Preston Davey. A second man, John McGowan Fazakerly, 31, will also appear charged with allowing the death of a child. Both men have been charged with cruelty and sexual assault offenses, according to the Crown Prosecution Service. The 13-month-old baby was brought into Blackpool Victoria Hospital unresponsive and was sadly pronounced dead a short time after. Police said they were called to the hospital around 7:15 p.m. on July the 27th of 2023 for baby Preston. Varley, formerly from Blackpool and now Grimsarg near Preston, was initially arrested on suspicion of murder and later arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and ill treatment and neglect of a child under 13. Both men were rearrested on Wednesday, June the 11th, and were charged last night on June the 12th with several offenses. McGowan Fazakerly from Grimsarg was charged with causing and allowing the death of a child, 2 counts of cruelty to a person under 16, and sexual assault of a male child under 13. So, if you kind of couldn't read through the lines here, well, actually, you can go to the article. The article will be in the show notes. It actually lists out the charges of both of these demons and what they're going to be facing. Again, these are alleged crimes, so that I don't run into any lawsuits here. These are alleged crimes. But let me sum up the allegations and what these two people are being charged with. They anally raped a 13-month-old baby boy to death. Yep. And we're going to put his picture up on the screen actually right now. That's the boy. That boy was anally raped by these two homosexual demons until he died. That's Preston Davey. Look at his face. So, right into my big takeaways here, okay? So this should be the least controversial thing I say today because we're going to be, hitting some major third rails today on today's episode. But if found guilty, both of these men should be executed publicly. I mean, I've talked about this a lot, people, especially child sexual offenders. Like, what exactly is the argument for not executing them publicly? Why don't we execute publicly anymore? Like, well, what is the reason why we avoid this? And perhaps they should be raped to death. I mean, a lot of people have said like how you killed somebody should be how you are killed, especially if you tortured somebody. So how about we find a way that they could be raped to death? Because that's what they did to a 13-month-old boy. Second big takeaway is we need to ban gay surrogacy and adoption worldwide. You might be wondering, why is this part of the story? Well, Preston Davy, the baby, he was a part of this family, at least temporarily, because these individual men were actually their caretakers. This little boy was put in the care of these two gay men while they were getting ready to adopt him. Okay? And so because this is legal, this baby was put in their care even to begin with. And we need to ban that entirely. Because, as I talked about with Katie Faust, every single child deserves their mother and their father. Now, because of the brokenness of sin and because of death and all kinds of other issues, that's not always possible. But in a situation like this, what is the wisdom in putting a 13-month-old baby with two adult males that are not kin to this baby? Because as Katie Faust talks about in her work, and as I've talked about here on the show, aside from their mother's womb, the most dangerous place for a child to be, in this country, but I guess we can extend that out to the entire West, is in the care, in the care of an adult male that is not kin to them. That's when these sexual assaults happen. That's when physical assaults happen. That's when all kinds of abuse happens. And so you decide to put a 13-month-old baby with two gay men, right? Which, you know how I pointed that out a few months ago? I forget exactly what story I was talking about, but isn't it always so interesting that these gay men are wanting to create baby boys or adopt baby boys? It's like the overwhelming majority of them want boys. Have you ever wondered why? Are we allowed to talk about why that could possibly be? That they would want a small boy that is in their care and nobody can see what's happening to them at any time? And then I've had other people, when I posted this story on my Instagram, they're like, we really need to stop demonizing gay couples, and even straight couples abuse kids and blah, blah, and all these different things. True. Those things happen. But that is, what about the cost of tea in China, right? It's the most macabre form of whataboutism that I think I've ever heard. Yeah. These two gay men anally raped a baby to death. But, there are straight couples that abuse children as well. It's like, well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this situation right here, right? I swear, anymore I'm getting emails and direct messages from people about the stuff that I'm not talking about. Somebody was out there complaining about the clip I showed of that show where the woman had an abortion and didn't tell the guy, and the guy freaks out and all that. And he's like, this guy's like, well, what about, the man? He should have been stepping up from the beginning and he shouldn't have, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, and if they had both been Christians, this wouldn't have happened. And also it's a television show, okay? Right? Planned Parenthood helped this group write this episode, and they're trying to make the man look like a crazy person, and it was actually the opposite that happened. So how about you guys evaluate what I'm saying and stop complaining about the stuff that I'm not talking about, okay? But back to this gay surrogacy thing and the adoption part. Again, what is the wisdom in making this possible? In allowing two gay men to adopt a child, and also allowing two gay men to create a child via IVF, right? Another thing that should be banned. But they're creating a child via IVF, putting it into the rented womb of a surrogate, and then they're paying for this child, right? Again, you have to make the affirmative case for why we should be doing things like that, because for the entirety of human history up to this point, that has not been something that has happened. So again, I will be following this case. If found guilty, obviously it's in the UK, so they may just get a slap on the wrist for all we know. And then obviously I'm still going to be pushing for the ban of gay surrogacy and adoption worldwide. Before we get into the main subject matter of today and then get into the rest of the quick hitters, obviously you need to talk a little bit about the Dominion program, guys. If you're just new to the show, last year we launched a discipleship coaching program called Dominion. We are currently right in the middle. We're weeks into going through the applications for teams 4 and beyond. We've gotten a lot of applications. We have a lot of guys that are very, very interested. But basically you guys demanded it. You listened to this show, you've read my devotionals, and you're like, I want more. I want more direct coaching. I want access to guys that are like-minded just like you. Because the thing is there are guys out there that are struggling in, one way or another. Maybe they're just not the spiritual, mental, or physically resilient person that they want to be. Maybe they're not the father they want to be. Maybe they're not crushing it at work. Maybe they just don't really have a marriage that they would want or for others to emulate. And so you you don't have foxhole, you're just missing the mark. So I created the Dominion program that allows you to have a plan to address all those issues, allows you to create that community. It'll call you to action. And guys, the thing is if you seize the process, again, because I'm wrapping up with teams 1, 2, and 3 right now, the guys that have really seized this process have seen such substantial change in their lives. It's been incredible to listen to. Like we had guys, empty out their savings to be a part of this program. We had guys, get their wives involved in their program and all the different content that they're going through. And they really seized the process because they were like, I don't want to stay stuck in neutral anymore. Okay. They were just stuck in this malaise. They were just kind of on the couch, literally and figuratively. And this is the program that got them up and off the couch. And so today, just real quick before we get into the main subject matter, I do want you to hear from a current Dominion team member. So this is Will Jernen. So he is from Dominion Team 3. And so I did like a little interview with him. So let's actually go to those clips here. All right, guys, as we've been doing here a little bit lately, we've been letting you hear from some of our guys that are in the Dominion program. So we've had guys from all kinds of different teams. But today we have a member of Dominion Team 3. This is Will Jernen. So Will, thank you so much for coming to the show. Let's set the tone for everybody because you already got, your dead animal skulls there on the wall behind you. So everyone's going to be a huge fan of you. But, how old are you? What do you do for a living? Where do you live?
I live in Castle Rock, Colorado. I'm 42 years old, and I am in the multifamily real estate investment business.
Okay, so in Colorado, I know with all the hunting going on, what do you think about all the wolves they let loose in y'all's state? Because I got to tell you, as someone who goes and hunts there periodically and occasionally, I'm not psyched about it.
It's a mess. It's terrible. And I think the long-term impacts on the state are going to be, very bad. But that's not the only thing going on in Colorado that's absolutely crazy. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Don't worry. That's what we have the quick hitters section of the show for, because every time I mention the state of Colorado, I wish I was talking about the beautiful Rocky Mountains and the wonderful elk herds, but I have to talk about stupid people in Boulder and Denver saying stupid things and voting for stupid people. But we'll digress from there because wanted to get you on today because you just kept popping to mind when we were coming up on this big push for Dominion. Again, guys, Undaunted.Life/Dominion is where you can go and put in your application. But on a lot of the calls and things like that, it seems like you've had some ahas, and you and I were even talking a little bit off air. There was one big thing that happened for you at the beginning of our program, because for those of you, we've talked about it. We have the 6 pillars of a Dominion man. That's kind of the structure of the Dominion program. We've got this big workbook that you get if you join the program, the whole thing. But they kind of work in concert with one another, and they are in order. And the very first one, these are kind of this over that things. It's God over self. Because we're supposed to love ourselves and treat ourselves well. But if we don't love God and serve God, then it basically doesn't matter how many push-ups you do and if you eat kale. It's just kind of one of those things. So tell me a little bit more about kind of the big aha that you had towards the beginning of this program.
Sure. So, God over self was, by far the thing that has convicted me the most and still convicts me to this day. And, and particularly, the concept of, focusing on yourself can be dangerous. I'm a guy who, has, been haughty, been prideful, been arrogant, been unwilling to submit to the Lord, in the past in my life. And, going through that, hearing that, going through the work on the verses, and the extra reading, really changed my perspective in that way.
Yeah, I'll say when I was coming up with the workbook, the thing is when you do a program like Dominion, like this coaching type thing, you can like micromanage it to an extreme degree, or you could just point people in a generalized direction that helps reinforce the material. And so that's what, in the workbook, there's suggested additional reading. So some books that kind of work within that pillar. There's additional Bible study. And you know how it goes with Bible study. It's like, I can give you a verse or a chapter, but if you want to really understand the context and really understand what you're consuming, like you got to really go for it. And it sounds like you have. But before we let you go, because you got important things to do and wolves to chase off your property, there are guys right now that are maybe even somewhat on the fence. They're like, okay, this sounds good. I think this is timing. I think God's telling me to go this direction, but I'm not so sure. Hey, this is going to take quite the investment of time and funds and effort. And, I just don't know. They're just on the fence. What would you say to the guy that's on the fence?
I would say get off the fence and commit. Invest in your relationship with the Lord, and He will create big returns for you.
Amen. Amen. All right, Will, I appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
All right, guys, applications are live on our website, so we only have a few weeks left for you guys to get in your applications, Undaunted.Life/Dominion, or you can just check it out in the show notes, Undaunted.Life/Dominion. It's not a very long application, and we just need to basically get an idea of who you guys are. If we like your application, you're going to get an interview where we're going to tell you all the details about the program. So guys that are sending me DMs and emails trying to get like, hey, just give me the skinny on the program, you really have to go through the application process and the interview so you can be told like, hey, this is what you should be expecting. And, they're going to be reviewed almost immediately. But if you want in this program, don't wait. Like, you got to get your application in. The application deadline is Monday, June the 30th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. So Monday, June the 30th, because by the beginning of July, we need to know who we're rolling with. We need to know who our killers are. So again, Undaunted.Life/Dominion, Undaunted.Life/Dominion. But I've been waiting a few weeks to talk about this, because we've seen so much happening really around the globe, but specifically in this country as it pertains to immigration. Immigration has been something that's been talked about for administration after administration after administration, but during the Biden administration, there was a legitimate crisis going on at the southern border, and it was kind of this don't believe your lying eyes type thing. No, the southern border is not just wide open. No, those videos and pictures of people just streaming across the border in droves by the thousands, like that's not actually happening. No, there's not millions of people that are coming into the country because of Joe Biden's open border policies and all those types of things. But as we were getting into the run-up to the 2024 election, that was the cornerstone of Trump's big White House push, right? Because, for the first time he was put in office, he was elected to office, it was about build that wall and those types of things. So immigration was a big thing, but he really didn't get done what he wanted to get done during that process. And then, losing part of Congress, 2 years into his term, and then constantly having to deal with all kinds of things like these hoaxes from the Democrats. And then you get into 2020, you get into the George Floyd summer, and you get into COVID and different things like that. But this was basically the center point, because Americans were tired of hearing the stories about illegal immigrants. They were tired of hearing the stories about illegal immigrants hurting American people. And so when Donald Trump was elected and whenever he was put in office, the border shut down pretty much immediately. We went from thousands of people coming across the border and being released, processed, and then released into the country, or evading detection altogether, coming into the country. That shut down literally almost immediately. Okay. But then Trump, as he signaled during the election, and as he's also continued to signal on into his presidency, is that immigrations and customs enforcement, that they are going to be doing mass deportations. They are going to be focusing on criminals and terrorists primarily, but the administration, and I also agree with this, if you're in this country illegally on purpose, you are by definition a criminal. You broke federal law by coming into this country. This isn't jaywalking, right? You broke federal immigration law, and so you are a criminal. But obviously, they are specifically talking about people that, in addition to being a criminal that has crossed the border illegally, they are doing additional crimes in this country, and also terrorist suspects, all those different things. And so that's basically what they've been focusing on. But then we have Los Angeles County. We saw this a couple of weeks ago. There were a bunch of protests that broke out. Okay. And, I say protests, there's some protesting, but then there's a lot of rioting, there's a lot of looting, but they are just aghast that Immigrations and Customs Enforcement is enforcing federal immigration law. It's just crazy to them that that would happen. And it's because we've had decade after decade after decade of administration after administration, including Republican administrations, basically ignoring the immigration issue outright. And so we've got these riots that broke out in Los Angeles County, and that spread to other major cities in the United States, Dallas, New York City, all those types of things. And then last weekend, there was this whole no kings protest. Wasn't that so cute? Oh, we're not going to have any kings. Donald Trump's acting like a king. Yeah, these were the same people, because some of them are still wearing masks. These are the same people that had no problem with kings telling them, hey, you can't go outside, you can't go to work, your kids can't go to school. Also, you need to take this experimental vaccine and all those types of things. And if you don't do those things, we're going to ruin you in the community. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your social media accounts. But yeah, no kings, right? Yeah, let's not talk about any kings. So Donald Trump sent in the National Guard. And so there were people that were criticizing him, and then there's kind of a back and forth going on between Governor Newsom there in California and with some of the court systems about whether or not Trump had the jurisdiction to be able to do that. But some people are criticizing Trump for sending in the National Guard when it was not requested by Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles or Governor Gavin Newsom of California. But there is a definitive reason why they were not requesting the National Guard. It's because they like riots when it's people on their side, which it's almost 100% of the time it's people on their side that are rioting, right? People on the right typically have jobs to do, and they're typically paying taxes so that people like this can sit on their butts and do nothing. So these two people that are in charge, the magistrates of their areas, they were essentially never going to be in a scenario where they were going to be requesting the National Guard to begin with. And then you have to ask, what is Donald Trump supposed to do? Like, is he supposed to just sit around and allow these anarchists to run wild and to loot businesses and burn cop cars and hurt people and kill people and destroy a major American city? Like, is that the alternative? So I just find it to be deeply, deeply disingenuous that these people are complaining. But then we have people that, and their supporters, it's so crazy to me. They're literally willing to kill law enforcement officers to keep them from being sent back to their home countries. So these people that are here illegally and the people that support them, they would kill law enforcement to prevent from being sent home to these countries that they purport to love, right? So I have three big questions that'll kind of help us, and then we're going to get into a bunch of major points about this because there's so many layers to this. So we're just going to peel back the onion as much as we can today. Three big questions. The first big question is, are these people in this country illegally? Like this is just flowchart stuff. Yes, they're in this country illegally. Okay. Or no, they're not in this country illegally. So that's question number one. And then question number two is attached to question number one. Should we enforce our laws as a country? Because this is not controversial at all. This is just a thing. If you don't have laws and if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. Right? I mean, what would you call a place that didn't have laws or a border? You wouldn't refer to it as a country, as a place, right? And so as a people, we have to look at this as the populace of the United States. It's like, okay, if people are in this country illegally, what are we to do with those people? Should we enforce our laws that are on the books? Should we get rid of those laws? Should we add additional laws? Those are two of the first big three questions. But this is the big question. Question number three. Then why don't you want to go back? Why don't you want to go back? Because the thing that these people that are here illegally have to explain, but never will, is why do you have so much pride for your home country, and yet you are simultaneously utterly unwilling to actually live there? Right? Let's talk specifically about Los Angeles County. What are the flags that are being burned and what are the flags that are being waved? It's American flags being burned, and it's Mexican flags that are being waved. You have people on motorcycles, you have people standing on top of burned out cars and all that, waving the Mexican flag. And yet these people have no desire to live in Mexico. Why not? Am I racist for asking that question, for posing the question? Because here's the thing. I am all for having pride for your heritage, okay? But if you're taking up space permanently in another country, especially if you're doing so illegally, and you are doing nothing to contribute nor make that country better, then why exactly are you complaining? Like help me understand that. Like, you're complaining about this country, and yet you so desperately want to live here and not the country of the flag that you're waving. Again, help me understand. So I want to break down a couple of different thoughts. I want to give my thoughts on the situation in general. I'm going to give my thoughts specifically on the illegal immigrants that are here, and then let's try to look at this from a biblical perspective. So in general, as I said before, a country without borders and without laws is not a country. Okay, so we need to kind of keep that in mind as we work through this. But a lot has been made about how these raids are being carried out. Okay, how these ICE raids are being carried out. There's a lot of stories that are not true, and then there's some that are true. But these ICE law enforcement officers are having to do some fairly dangerous raids to find these people. And do you want to know one of the main reasons why these raids have been carried out in such a dramatic and dangerous fashion in a lot of cases? It's because of sanctuary city policies. Because what these ICE agents should be able to do is just go to the jails and prisons and start there and gather the illegal immigrant criminals from there and start their deportation process. But they can't do that because these cities, I think there's 1,000 sanctuary city jurisdictions currently in the country right now, but they can't because these cities will not allow ICE agents to come into the prisons and take the illegal immigrants. Okay? So some of these dramatic stories and some of the things where people are having to be violently taken back or something like that is because these sanctuary city policies are preventing ICE from doing their jobs. And there's again, we're just going to flow into a lot of different topics. You hear online, you hear on major news media that what Trump is doing is like what Hitler did with the Jews. Now, it's been a popular thing since, I don't know when it started, but let's say George W. Bush. If a Republican does something you don't like, he's Hitler, right? So he was Hitler, and then Mitt Romney was Hitler, and then John McCain was Hitler, and then Trump's definitely Hitler. He's orange Hitler. He's extra bad Hitler, right? And so to say that what Donald Trump is doing right now is just like what Hitler did with the Jews, then what you're saying is that Donald Trump is rounding up a group of people based on their race or ethnic heritage and busing or training them off to facilities where they are systematically murdered. Except, this is just one little sticking point. We're not rounding up illegal immigrants and killing them. So if Donald Trump was doing that right now, I would be one of the voices in the streets saying about how abhorrent that is and how we shouldn't operate in that way as a country, right? But that's not happening because you're an idiot if you say something like that. Also, I can sum up the United States and what our approach should be to immigration in one question. Because a lot's been asked about, okay, well, how should we approach immigration? What should we do? Like, what's a better policy? So here's the question. Will this person be a net positive or a net negative for American society if we let them in and let them stay? That's the question. Will this person be a net positive or a net negative for American society if we let them in and let them stay? Because if they're not an asylee, like if they're not seeking asylum, which if they are, then I do think that we should have a certain number of those people that we do protect in this country. But, if they are not that, the only question is not, do they like their home country? Would they rather live somewhere else? Is the climate not as fun in their hometown as it would be here? It's, are they a net positive or a net negative for this country? Because a lot of people are like, well, this person doesn't like their home country and they don't have a lot of economic opportunities and blah, blah. And you guess what? That's not America's problem. So if you live in Ecuador, or if you live in Belize, or if you live in Mexico or any of these other places and you don't like it there, well, then work to fix it. Why is that my problem as an American taxpayer that you don't like where you live? Now, there are people in countries all over the globe that if they stay in their home country, they might die. They're actual asylum-seeking individuals. I am all for protecting those people here in this country, but they need to assimilate. They need to assimilate to our language. They need to assimilate to our values. Otherwise, it's just kind of like, man, we can't take in everybody, okay? Another point is that many people are talking about how California used to be part of Mexico, right? To which I would say, California was part of Mexico for a couple of decades, okay? That land area was part of Mexico, the country, for a couple of decades. It's been part of America for almost 2 centuries now. So I think at this point we can claim it, right? But it's also actually pretty funny watching people that claim to be anti-colonialism, because that's like really, really popular. It's like, we're anti-colonialism. These are people that are also claiming a Mexican identity and a preference for Mexican culture, okay? What these dum-dums don't realize, because they've never read a history book, is the only reason Mexico is a thing. The only reason Mexico is a thing is because the Spanish colonized that area of the globe, killed off the tribal people that were already there to establish it as a satellite state of their country. And then later a different group of people, like identifying as Mexicans, took over that area and created Mexico. Kind of sounds really colonialism-like, right? That's exactly what happened here. That's what happened for all of human history. A certain people group had rights, at least they thought, to a certain area, and another group that was bigger and badder was like, actually, no, you don't. And you can either give it to us or we're going to kill all of you and take it anyway. So easy way or the hard way. Okay. Another thought here is Barack Obama is still considered a hero by many Democrats. Do you know how many people Barack Obama deported during his 8 years in office? Around 5 million people. And it's so interesting because I'm thinking back, I've taken some shots to the head, but I still have a decent memory. Were there riots back then? Were they burning cop cars? Were they throwing Molotov cocktails? Were they looting Nike stores? when Barack Obama was deporting literally millions of people from this country? Because I don't really seem to remember that. But let's talk about, Barack Obama, that's Democrat Jesus. Let's talk about Jesus. Because I've seen a lot of arguments and I've seen a lot of pictures. There was this one picture that was on a billboard in Los Angeles. It's of an ICE agent, walking Jesus, who's handcuffed out, basically talking about how Jesus was an illegal immigrant. And this is what Trump and ICE would do to Jesus. But let's, again, because on the show, we just try to stick with the truth. And so there's a lot of really sticky, icky truths here. The first thing is that Jesus of Nazareth was never an illegal immigrant at any point in his life. Because everywhere he went in his life, including Egypt, was part of the Roman Empire. So me as an Oklahoman, if I travel to Wyoming, I'm not an illegal immigrant to Wyoming because that's part of America, right? Even if I cross part of the ocean and go to Hawaii, I'm not illegally immigrating there or illegally there because that is a part of the United States of America. And so again, these people, they've never read the Bible. They don't know anything about history. So these things are just kind of lost on them. But it is quite the image having an ICE agent, frog marching Jesus somewhere. But now I want to transition to my thoughts on the illegal immigrants themselves, okay? So a lot of these people that are immigrating here or being smuggled here or whatever, they're coming from what we would call the third world. And the reality is when you allow people from the third world into your country and you don't require their assimilation to your cultural context, then it is inevitable that they will bring their toxic and unsuccessful values against your civilization in your country. Because as many people have said, I'm certainly not the first person to say this, when you import third world values and you don't change them, the more people that you import with these third world values, they will simply put their values in place where you are, right? So this is like a derivative of when people, move from California and move to Texas, and Texans are like, hey, happy to have you, right? Here's a cowboy hat and a chicken fried steak, but don't bring your voting values with you, right? Remember all the values you had back there, which ruined your state? Yeah, don't bring that here because this is just a different piece of land, but it's under different magistrates, rules, regulations. We just can't have that here. When you constantly are bringing people in that don't have the values that you purport to have as your country, how do you expect to withstand that? Also, I've gotten very, very tired. I've grown very tired of hearing about how the United States is a quote unquote nation of immigrants, as if all waves of immigration for the entirety of the history of the United States are the same. Because again, what these people are saying is like, well, look at the early 20th century when all these Irish and Polish and Jewish and Italian or whatever immigrants came to this country. And are you going to say the same thing about those people as you're saying about these poor, destitute people from Central and South America that are coming into this country? Well, the problem is let's look at those countries. So Ireland, Poland, Jews that were coming from all over Europe, and specifically Israel, Italy, all these different places, those weren't third world countries. At the time when those people were coming here, again, I have Irish and Scottish ancestors that came to this country. Ireland and Scotland weren't third world countries at the time, right? And they had values that were similar to what was being established in America. And guess what? Their immigration to this country was legal at the time. So how exactly are these things even similar? And also, let's talk about this. Let's talk about all those groups of people that I just said. Those groups, didn't refuse to assimilate. Right? Now, they may have gathered in Irish neighborhoods and Italian neighborhoods and things like that to try to support one another, but they didn't refuse to assimilate to American culture. In many cases, they rushed to assimilate as quickly as possible. Why? Because they saw the opportunity that they had here in this country to succeed if they worked hard and they weren't automatically looking for handouts. If they didn't understand the language, they were learning the language. If they had a business back home, they didn't come here and complain like, oh, I'm going to start over my business. Government, give me a handout. No, they just started their business here, right? Because this was the land of opportunity. That's why they came here to begin with, okay? Another thought is, I think pretty soon, if not now, we might be at that point. I think we need to be done with this whole narrative of, oh, it's just a bunch of poor people that just want better lives stuff, because we just keep hearing that, right? In a lot of cases, and you can see this, look at the people that are illegal immigrants that are boldly on the streets, throwing rocks at cop cars and destroying businesses and things like that. A lot of these people are spoiled, entitled babies that are taking advantage of the niceness of the American system. They're taking advantage of the American taxpayer, right? Me and you. And the growing of our nanny state. Okay, and again, why is it my fault that their country of origin sucks? Okay? Let's just say that narrative is mostly true, which it likely isn't, but let's just say that narrative is true as, oh, these are just poor people that want a better life. Why is that America's problem? Why is that the West's problem? Because we've been successful? Because we're rich, like as a nation? So all of a sudden it is our responsibility to give you a comfortable life here when you have no desire to try to fix your country of origin, right? Because let's look at it this way. In a normal situation, right, if we were all operating on good philosophies and, proper motives, we would look specifically at these men coming over, lots of whom are military-aged men, strong, virile guys in their 20s, and then you've got, burgeoning, successful guys in their 30s and 40s, that type of age group. We would look at these men as pathetic for running away from their country that needs to be fixed, right? Like when I see military-aged males fleeing a country against an invading force, it's like, wait a minute, y'all are specifically the guys that are supposed to stay so that the women and children and elderly can get out. So they have a country to come back to, right? But we don't look at these people that way. Oh, these poor guys that we need to give opportunities here in this country. Wait, why don't we say, hey, look, you pathetic coward, go back to your country and try to fix it. Oh, well, the government's too powerful. So, okay, well, then I guess you're going to be in charge of the only time in human history where a government has been overthrown or replaced? Like, what exactly are we talking about? Because one argument is that the people that are coming into this country, into America, they participated in some way in the destruction of their country, okay? Whether it's by electing certain leaders or not stepping up or not having their voices heard or not pushing back, but in some way, they participated to the destruction of their own country. And now they're in our country and they're acting the exact same way, except with their hands out, right? I mean, again, it's a derivative of the people leaving California and fleeing to Texas or Florida or wherever, only to continue voting like they did in California. You lead to the downfall of California. It's like, why would we allow this? Why would we allow you to destroy your current country and then just come over to ours? I don't know why I just thought about this, but for some reason, maybe the Holy Spirit put it in my head. But I remember this guy that I was good friends with in high school. His parents gave him everything. He never had to have a job. He never had to have money. He never had to pay for his own stuff. So he got this new pair of Adidas shoes, right? This great, nice looking pair of white Adidas shoes. Within like 3 or 4 months, he just completely destroyed it. They completely destroyed these shoes. Now, all the shoes that I bought growing up, I had to pay for. If I wanted nice shoes, if I wanted the new Nikes or one of the new whatevers, I had to pay for them myself. And so to this day, I take very, very, very good care of my shoes. This guy didn't have that paradigm in his brain because everything was just handed to him on a silver platter. And so he destroyed these shoes. I remember one day looking at him, my kid's name was Ryan. I was like, Ryan, what is up with your shoes? Did you just drag them behind your car that you also didn't have to pay for? He's just like, oh, no, whatever. And you know what he got for Christmas? A brand new pair of shoes just like those. The exact same shoes, but a brand new pair. And you know what he did with those? He destroyed them. Because when people don't participate in the purchase or the building of something, it's easy for them to treat it very, very cheaply, right? Because they didn't earn it. And why would we allow this? And again, we also keep being told that all these illegal immigrants, they're just great people and they're great for our country. They're a net positive. We keep being told all these things. But let's just look at a few examples. What are the major examples of illegal immigrants in this country helping their communities in any significant kind of way? Do you know any big time examples? What are the illegal immigrants that have come here and that have, gone to school and everyone knew they were an illegal immigrant, but then they go to college and they have some sort of breakthrough in science or math or medicine or business or something like that. What are the significant stories about that are making the American community better? Again, I'm not trying to make this as like, all Americans are paragons of virtue by any stretch of the imagination. But it's like, again, we keep being told, I'm taking the arguments that people are making and I'm taking them to their logical conclusion. Hey, these people are great for this country. We need them here. Okay, why? Well, what is the argument for them being here as opposed to anywhere else on the planet? And we keep being told to worry about the kids that were brought here illegally against their will. Okay, this was obviously a big sticking point during the Obama administration is what do we do with the dreamers? Kids that were brought here when they were kids, like they didn't walk across the border. They didn't pay a coyote to ferry them across the border to get them here. But here's an interesting comment that I actually heard from someone online. And so I can't take credit for it. I just forgot who said it. The people that are complaining about the fact that illegal immigrant children that never did anything and how we shouldn't blame them for the crimes of their parents, these are the same exact people that think that white people like me who have never owned slaves are responsible for reparations. What a comment, right? Oh, these kids are here illegally. It's not their fault. It's the faults of their parents, those types of things. Like we can't hold the people at the end of this whole process responsible. Okay, well then why do you want me to pay to give money to black people in this country? Black people, mind you, who may not be descendants of slaves, or they could even be descendants of slave owners or slave hunters, right? From the other tribes in Africa that actually would gather other people from other tribes, put them in cages and put them by the beach. And then, the Spanish or the English or whoever would pick them up and then take them over to the New World, right? But somehow I'm supposed to pay, and people that look like me that have the same level of melanin as I do, I'm supposed to pay for reparations somehow. It's rich. It's bold. It's also pretty stupid. Also, if an American citizen were to do what we're seeing in this country in another country, right? They would be arrested, and depending on the country they decide to do this in, they would be executed for that crime. And so I mean just going there illegally, overstaying their visa, waving the American flag in another home country while they stand on top of a burned out car, right? And do you know how much sympathy the American people would give to somebody that did this in another country? None. We would give no sympathy to these people. Do you know why? Because they wouldn't deserve any sympathy, right? So you would say like, wait, John Bob went over to this other country and he was like, saying I should be able to stay here. And they're like, why do you think you should be able to stay here? And it's like, oh, but just because people aren't illegal, because there's no such thing as borders, because something like that. They'd be like, okay, that's cute. Drag them off to the gulag. I wouldn't feel bad for that person. I'd be like, that person's an idiot. It's kind of like when people at Yellowstone, they get gored by a buffalo because they were standing too close to it because they wanted a picture, right? So they get, smoked by a bison. I don't feel bad for that person, right? I don't want them to die, but it's like, I don't feel bad for you. You're an idiot, right? You danced with the devil and you lost, right? But somehow we as Americans are supposed to be patient and understanding with these people that are burning our flag while flying the flag of another country when we wouldn't accept that from somebody else. I've also heard from people, again, the comments that I've been waiting in over the last several weeks. I'm so glad I'm able to get this finally out of my brain. I've heard some people say that it's no big deal that someone's waving the flag of another country because many people wave and fly flags of other countries here. I've heard, Irish pubs, they have Irish flags up inside their restaurants. Italian restaurants, they've got Italian flags. They got Italy flags. I mean, even look at me. If you've seen me take video in my home gym, I've got an Ireland flag up in my gym. I've got a Scotland flag up in my gym. Below the American flag, which is the point, because I do not consider my ancestral heritage, that is Celtic, to be above my identity as an American citizen, right? Also, I'm not standing on top of a car that I recently destroyed with some of my stupid friends, waving that flag in defiance of the country where I currently reside. But yeah, aside from that, it's exactly the same. And to all the people out there that are like, oh, it's just a few bad eggs in the crowd. Okay, yeah. The only video you're seeing is of the people that aren't being peaceful. What about the majority of people that are being peaceful? Okay, let me put a scenario to you. Let's say that I was part of a pro-life demonstration, and then there were some agitators that came in and pretended to be part of the pro-life March for Life that I was a part of, right? And they decided they were going to torch cop cars and loot Adidas stores and that kind of thing. The reason that would be different than the situation that is being described is because those people, in my scenario, fundamentally disagree with why I and the people with me are protesting to begin with. They're coming in, they disagree with me, they're using my protest as a way for them to destroy stuff because they're an anarchist. These people aren't pro-life. They don't believe the way that I do. But in the case of these rioters in Los Angeles and all over the West right now, they agree completely with the peaceful protesters and that they don't want immigration law to be enforced in this country. They want anarchy. So again, why are you pointing that out as if that's some sort of a winning argument, right? It doesn't make any sense at all. And also I keep hearing about how these rioters and protesters, how they're revolutionaries, right? You know, that guy, on the motorcycle with the the Mexican flag, and he's got his mask on, and, there's smoke and there's cops off in the distance. They're like, oh, this guy, he's a revolutionary. He's a hero, right? We're hearing these people called heroes. But let me ask you this question. If these people were actually heroes, then why are they covering their faces with masks? Kind of makes you wonder. I mean, if they were actually a revolutionary, wouldn't they actually want people to know and recognize who they are? I mean, who are the anonymous revolutionaries from history that you remember? Do we remember any of those people? Well, no, because they're anonymous. Or is it the fact that they're not revolutionaries at all, and they're just nihilistic, narcissistic anarchists that just want to see things burn? Heroes, really. Also, do you remember me telling you last year, I think I did this during my year-end wrap-up episode, that there were going to be a bunch of sob stories to make Americans feel bad for the illegal immigration and the mass, the mass migration into this country, but then the mass deportations. We were going to be getting a bunch of anecdotes and a bunch of sob stories. But I want to just remind you guys why I don't feel bad for these people, okay? Almost none of the people that are in this country illegally are actually refugees. As I've established on this episode and on past episodes, if you're actually an asylum seeker, I think that we should have a priority to have those people in this country temporarily and then potentially relocate them somewhere else outside of this country, right? But we will protect you for a time. We will care for you for a time. I think that is a good thing for Americans to do. Not everybody agrees with me, but that's just my position, okay? But almost none of these people are actually refugees. They just didn't want to live in their previous country anymore. And they didn't want to fix their previous country. Just from they were lazy. They just wanted to come here and live off of American largesse, right? But again, many of them were a party to the destruction of their home countries, and they're doing the same thing to ours now. So again, I don't feel bad for them because they're here now, peeing in our sandbox, and I don't really like that very much. Also, the reason why I don't feel bad for these people is that there's no statute of limitations on immigration law. So you'll get these sob stories about this person has been in this country for 20 years and they've never committed a crime. They've never even gotten a speeding ticket. Okay, well, 20 years ago, did they immigrate here illegally? Well, yeah. Well, okay, well, they're an illegal immigrant criminal and they need to be out of this country. I don't understand. Again, give me the positive argument for why they should stay. What, they've been here a long time? Again, think about the ridiculousness. Let's make it an extreme example. Let's say I murdered someone 20 years ago, and then the cops find me and they find DNA evidence that I was responsible for this murder. I say, hey, guys, that was 20 years ago. They would look at you like, yeah, you're insane and you're coming with us. There's no statute of limitations on immigration law. If there was, we are a nation of law, sort of, then yeah, it would be a different situation, but there's not a difference, right? So it doesn't matter if you've been here 5 minutes or 5 years, you're an illegal immigrant to this country. You have to be deported and go to the back of the line if you'd like to come back. But also, the reason why I don't feel bad for these people is you made your bed and now you have to lie in it. You know whose fault that is? Not mine. It's your fault. So a local news affiliate here in Oklahoma City recently talked about this horrible, terrible, sad story of, I think it was a Guatemalan man that was separated from his family because there was an ICE raid and he was arrested and he was separated from his family. Oh, it's just this horrible story and you're supposed to feel so bad. And people are talking about it as if this random man was just arrested for no reason. No reason at all. Because in their minds, the headline is man separated from his family by angry, mean, racist cops, right? But the circumstances of the separation makes all the difference, doesn't it? Right? So imagine if you saw this headline, Edmond man separated from wife and children. You'd be like, oh my gosh, what happened? But then you go into the story and the Edmond man is me, and I was separated from my wife and children because I drove drunk and I hit a telephone pole with my family in the car. Everybody's fine, but when the cops get there, they're like, yeah, we need to arrest this guy for drunk driving. But he was separated from his family. That doesn't matter. You know, like when you see a murder case or something like that and somebody is being convicted for murder, no one's talking about, but wait, he has a wife and kids. Yeah, that doesn't matter in this situation, right? It doesn't matter here because there's something superseding that. So this Guatemalan man that has been separated from his family, that has caused this angst and this pain for his wife and his children that he is no longer with, that is his fault. At any point, he could have taken his family, which I assume that he loves, and taken them back to his home country. But he knew he was living here illegally, living off the largesse and happiness and success of the American taxpayer, right? Suckling from the teat of this system, and he finally got caught. He had been here for years, separated from his family, and I feel really, really bad for his family that they were not a party to their dad's decision to stay here illegally, okay? That is not my fault as an Oklahoman. That's not my fault as a taxpayer in the state of Oklahoma and the United States. That is not my fault. That is this man's fault. I do not feel bad for him at all. So we get all the way down here, and this may seem, oh, this is kind of rough, and this is mean, and oh, Kyle's so angry and all that. But as a Christian, I do think through a biblical lens and a Christian lens as we approach a situation like this. So how should Christians think about the illegal immigration situation here in the United States? Real quick, I will give you a pro tip right off the bat here. Do not accept biblical arguments from people that do not believe in the authority of Scripture, okay? Because you'll have people that are quoting verses to you or putting them on billboards or putting them on Facebook posts that don't even believe in God. So they don't believe in God. They certainly don't believe the Bible has any authority in their life, and yet they want to use it to bludgeon you, right? Don't accept that from anybody. What we're seeing from a lot of people is Leviticus 19:34. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So I would ask these people that quote that scripture, what is the context of that scripture? And they don't know the answer. Then I would follow up with, do you actually think that that's the only scripture in the Bible that deals with people from other countries? Is that the only one? So Pastor Josh Howerton actually had a great post over the weekend about all this. So he talks about different places in the Bible where God, one, divides the world into nations. We see that in Genesis 11. Establishes borders. We see that in Acts 17:26 and Deuteronomy 32:8. Led his people to build walls to protect their borders. So we see that in 2 Chronicles 14:7, Psalm 51:18, 1 Kings 3:1, and then the entire book of Nehemiah, right? You guys know how I feel about the book of Nehemiah, one of my favorite, if not my favorite of all the Old Testament books, right? So there are lots of scriptures that inform us of a worldview that we should hold in these types of moments, right? So it's kind of like I've got an interview coming up with JT English about a book where he talks about people really, they tend to know stories from the Bible, but they miss the story of the Bible. Kind of understand the difference? Like they know the story of David and Goliath, but they don't really understand how that is part of the story of Scripture, right? How it's the story that leads to the gospel. Which begs the question, why would God be okay with borders and walls? Because clearly, if you look at the story of Scripture, he is perfectly okay with borders, walls, laws, all those things. Is it because he wants us to hate the people outside of those borders and walls? No, right? He gives us specific instructions specifically to love the people behind our borders and walls, right? Because my primary goal here, right? Again, when the lawyer tried to trip up Jesus, what's the greatest of all the laws? Number 1, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. 2, love your neighbor as yourself. Let's talk about neighbor. Who is my primary neighbor? My primary neighbor is Kelsey Thompson, my spouse. My secondary neighbor are James and Elijah Thompson, my sons. And my tertiary neighbor is everybody else after that. So the reason why we built a house that has walls and we lock our doors at night is not because I hate people that are outside those doors. It's because I love the people inside those doors more than everybody else. And that is my primary responsibility. That's why God is okay with borders, walls, and laws, okay? And here's the thing for all the soft-hearted, soft-headed Christians out there that have so much heartburn over the sojourner and things like that. Okay, I will go ahead and say that these people need Jesus, because I've heard people say, like, why don't you want these people in this country? And then we can, give them the gospel and we can help them out on all those different things, as if the gospel only works in America, which is an interesting point that they're kind of making. Everyone needs Jesus, yes. But does that also mean that these people need the benefits that are provided by the American taxpayer? I mean, again, you have to make the affirmative case for that because you are for that. I don't have to. You're for that. Because some people are making this claim like, for the sake of Jesus, right? Because of, this passage in Leviticus that they can't even find in their Bibles because they don't own a Bible that talks about the sojourner, that they're just supposed to be here, living off of the American taxpayer, okay? Especially when they're being provided all these benefits and doing almost nothing to contribute back to that society. Also not a biblical ethic. Like, where do you see in Ecclesiastes or Proverbs where the sluggard is, considered just this great virtuous person, this person that doesn't do anything, they just suckle off the teat of the society that they're living? It's not a biblical value. And to those lecturing Christians and people like me about loving their neighbor, this is a big one. I've talked about a lot of important stuff, but this is very, very, very important. I will be told that because of my position and because of what I've been talking about for the last half hour or so, is that I don't love my neighbor. And that I'm supposed to love my neighbor. So what I would ask these people that I want to throw that in my face is, does that also apply to the American citizens that have been killed, harmed, or hurt by the presence of illegal immigrants here in this country? What about those neighbors? Because I happen to care about those neighbors. The women that have been raped by illegal immigrants that had they not been here, those women would not be raped. People that have been killed in this country, either intentionally or accidentally by a drunk driver, that was an illegal immigrant that was not in this country, or even a friend of mine here recently that was rear-ended by an illegal immigrant, and now they're going to have to pay out of pocket to fix their vehicle, as opposed to taking this person to small claims court, because you're taking someone to court that doesn't have money to pay you if they lose anyway, right? Just for the off chance that they might be sent back to their country of origin, even though they may just be able to waltz back over here as soon as there's another Democrat in office, right? Those are people that have been hurt by the presence of illegal immigrants in this country. Now, I don't understand why people don't get this. Like, when you look at people like Laken Riley, people like Laken Riley should be alive today. She would be alive today had the person that killed her been in Venezuela as opposed to here. Because I know this is hard for some Democrats and leftists to understand, but if the guy that killed Laken Riley had never been allowed in this country, he would not have had the opportunity to murder her in the woods, beat her to death with rocks. I know this is hard to understand, but does that make sense? Do the words I'm saying make sense to you? That if these people weren't here, then they wouldn't have had the opportunity to run the red light at that intersection where they T-boned a family minivan and then killed everyone inside, right? None of those things would be on the table because they wouldn't be here, right? So is it possible they could have been murdered or raped or hurt or harmed by an American? Yes. But if they're not supposed to be here to begin with, we're decreasing the chances to zero that anyone outside the country can harm someone inside this country. Hopefully that helps. Because ultimately, guys, we live in a constitutional republic. So we get to elect leaders that we think will do our will and our bidding when it comes to making laws and enforcing them. As a country, we get to choose how we want to enforce immigration. Okay? Because guess what? I don't care about what immigration looks like in India or in Bangladesh or in Australia or in any of those other countries because I don't live there. I'm not a citizen of that country. And also, I don't care about how any of those other countries think about my immigration system here in this country. You know why? Because they don't live here. They don't get to vote, right? But if America takes on all the world's poor and destitute, and criminals and terrorists for that matter, then America, the beacon of hope for so many around the globe, would cease to exist. There already is such a drag on this system. America is technically already bankrupt, right? The debt crisis is astonishing. Trump is certainly not doing us any favors there. He's just continuing the spending spree that, started, I guess you can't really tell when it started, but how we've just exploded to, $30+ trillion of debt. It's probably even higher than that. And so we are supposed to take on the world's poor and destitute here. How many of those people can we take before we completely cripple our own system? Why is it so bad that we think about Americans first and make sure that Americans are taken care of before we worry about every other country. Because guess what? If you are poor in another country, it is that country's responsibility to care for you. It's not mine. It's not America's. So you're not a bad Christian if you think that we should have a border wall. You're not a bad Christian if you think that illegal immigrant criminals and terrorists should be taken out of this country. You're not a bad Christian if you think that people that are illegal immigrants and that's the only crime they've ever committed is being a illegal immigrant, that they should be taken out of this country. You're also not a bad Christian or a racist or something like that if you think we should get to pick and choose the people that should stay here. The H-1B visa system it's a trash heap, right? It's a lottery. You have people in this country that are literally waiting on a lottery to determine whether or not they are able to stay here. I used to work at a company where there were a bunch of programmers that came from India, and they were fantastic people. They assimilated to our culture. They didn't just stay in their own areas and speak their native language. They learned English. They did a good job. They want to get married, raise a family, pay taxes, maybe own a business someday, start a business, start an app, those types of things. And the only reason or the only way that they would get to stay here is if they won the lottery. No, we should be able to pick and choose the people that we want to stay here, and the people that we don't want to stay here don't get to stay here. It's a pretty easy concept, but you're going to be told and you're going to be castigated as a racist, as a xenophobe, as all these things if for whatever reason you care about your primary neighbors first. Now, I'm just not here for it. Hey guys, real quick. So there you are. You're about to make some delicious meat, and you open up your cabinet and you freeze. You freeze because you look and you see you have like 3 or 4 dozen different seasonings, but this seasoning is just for your wild game, and this seasoning is really good on pork, but not really good on chicken, and you just kind of lose your mind and eventually just reach up there and grab a random one. So here's the thing, guys. I want you to stop getting jammed up by having too many options in the seasoning department. It's time for you to have a go-to seasoning for everything, and that's why I want to reintroduce you to my friends over at G's Seasoning. So this is a reintroduction because back in the day, I think this was over the winter, I told you guys about G's Seasoning. I was at my buddy Dale Brisby's house. We're about to shoot a podcast and all that, but he had made me some steaks, and I took one bite of this steak, and I was like, bro, what in the world was this seasoned with? He gave me a bottle of G's Seasoning. He told me a little bit about the story about it being a small family-owned operation in Texas and how they used to, back in the 80s, just hand out bags of this seasoning out of the back of a store and things like that, but that they had started bottling it and started selling it. And then I told you guys, wouldn't it be so cool if for the Christmas season, if you guys bought some G's Seasoning? And you know what you guys did? Y'all went out and bought it. And to those of you that have bought it, it has been an amazing thing for you. All of you have loved it, so I'm glad to reintroduce them to you. So G's Seasoning is an all-purpose seasoning that is great on beef, pork, wild game, chicken, fish, eggs, veggies. And guys, if you want a big boy hack, throw some G's on some popcorn. You can thank me later. So guys, stop getting a bunch of different seasonings for all of your different meat dishes. Support a small town American family business by going to gsseasoning.com. That is gsseasoning.com. Throw some G's on that. Okay, again, that is gsseasoning.com. That's Golf Sierra Seasoning.com. Order today. All right, guys, let's get into the quick hitters. It's a longer episode today. But hey, we're covering a lot of fun things, so hopefully you're still excited. Let's talk about Israel going to war with Iran. So I remember sitting on the back porch. I get a text from my buddy Adam. He's been on the forging table and all those things before. He's like, hey, man, turn on the news. It's getting real. Israel bombed Iran. And so you turn on the news, you start seeing things. This has been a long time coming. Okay, so you have Israel, and as we stand here right now, they have complete air superiority. They're literally doing refueling missions in the Iranian airspace. They're attacking across the borders of multiple other countries. They're targeting nuclear facilities. They're targeting the nuclear scientists. They've taken out a bunch of the nuclear scientists, a bunch of the nuclear facilities. They've taken out a bunch of the people that are leading the military. They've taken out local media. They've taken out a lot of different things. And according to Fox News on June the 15th, Netanyahu, the prime minister, said that he decided to attack Iran because the regime posed an existential threat to the Jewish state because of the enrichment of uranium and rushed to increase its ballistic missile arsenal. We had to act, Netanyahu said. We did act to save ourselves, but also not only to protect ourselves, but to protect the world from its incendiary regime. We can't have the world's most dangerous regime have the world's most dangerous weapons. Okay, so immediately after you see this, of course, no matter what Jerusalem does, even if they just sent, puppies and candy to all the countries around the world, somebody would be like, well, who's going to take care of these dogs? Who's going to feed these dogs? Well, that candy could rot people's teeth. It doesn't matter what Jerusalem does. It doesn't matter what the Jews do. People are going to hate them. But to the people in my comment section and the comment sections all over the globe, well, why didn't they just stick with a diplomatic approach? Guys, we've been trying the diplomatic approach for decades. Okay? Most recently, Donald Trump gave Iran 60 days to get their crap together. They kept coming to the table, and it became very clear very quickly that the Iranians didn't actually want to denuclearize. They had no interest in any type of an agreement that would keep them from enriching uranium and getting nuclear warheads that they could then point at their enemies, specifically, and most specifically, Israel. And then on day 61, Israel struck. So there's a little bit of consternation, and we don't really know like how much coordination was there between the Trump administration and the Netanyahu regime and Israel and the United States. Obviously, you can see that there was some coordination there, and Trump seems to be mulling right now, basically giving the death knell, like not putting troops on the ground, not American boots on the ground in Iran, but air assets that could take out and basically destroy the entirety of the nuclear capabilities of the country of Iran. But here's the thing for all the, why didn't they negotiate, people? Why didn't they negotiate? You cannot negotiate in good faith with an enemy whose express purpose for existence is your destruction. Right? Because people think that these are just two parties that just kind of disagree a little bit on like economic policy and immigration and some other random things. That's not it. Iran wants to kill every single Jew in Israel. And they want to kill every single American in America. Right? They want an Iranian jihadist caliphate. They would love to bring on the destruction of the world because in their mind, they get to go to paradise. You can't negotiate in good faith with people that just want to kill you, right? I just don't understand it. And to the guys that are like, we don't want American boots on the ground in Iran, I'm with you. I don't want Americans on the ground in Iran. It doesn't look like we're going to need to do that. Time will tell, but it doesn't look like we're going to need to do that. So I'm going to go to my big takeaways here. Number one, if I haven't been completely clear up to this point, I fully support Israel in its decision to preemptively attack. Fully. I hope they win completely. And this is why I say that. Let's say my next door neighbor. They came over to my house one day and they said, I hate you. I hate everything about you. And I'm going to kill you. If you give me the opportunity, I'm going to freaking kill you. I'm going to kill your entire family. I'm like, okay. And then they go back over and I see them in their backyard and they're building a cannon. And over weeks and months, I see them, forging metal, and I see them putting things together and creating, the wood base and all those types of things. They're building a cannon, little by little, and it's pointed right at my house. Then I see them making cannonballs, right? So they got the cannon built, it's pointed right at the house, and then they're starting to make cannonballs. And then one day I see him walking over to put a cannonball in the cannon, and now he's got a match and he's about to light the fuse, okay? I am well within my rights to preemptively attack. And especially if I have the easy capability of like in an instant, basically in a snap, destroying that cannon, I would be a fool not to, right? So this is a derivative of the never throw the first punch argument. There's a lot of wussies out there that's just kind of how they approach life, right? They heard it from their moms and their liberal teachers growing up. This is, how Chelsea said it, that you never throw the first punch in a fight. Guys, I've seen a lot of fights, and I don't just mean MMA, but I do mean that as well. I've seen a lot of street fights and a lot of things that ended with the first punch. Someone throws a haymaker, they land on the button, guy's out cold, head bounces off the pavement, right? So if the fight can end in one punch, because again, if I let the guy shoot the cannon, my next door neighbor, if I let him shoot the cannon at my house, we're all dead. We all die, right? Like I might get lucky and the cannonball will miss me and there won't be a fire and something like that. But the odds of me and my family dying are going to be high, right? Because he's pointing a cannon at me. In a fight situation, I know that the fight is on the minute somebody gets in my bubble, right? Where their limbs or their weapons can touch me. So once they get into that bubble and they've got that look in their eye, or they've told me, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to fight you, I'm going to punch you, I would be a moron if I didn't throw the first punch. Right? It'd probably be a double leg and then mount and then maybe elbows, but there's a lot of options there. But you don't wait and absorb the first punch because that's stupid. But my main reason for supporting Israel is not because I'm a Christian. It's because they're an American ally. Because a lot of people are like, why are you supporting Israel? Like, it doesn't even make any sense. Like, you're just supporting them because you're a Christian. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, they are the only American ally that we have in the Middle East. They're the only non-Islamist ally that we could have in the Middle East. Like, we have some naturalized relations with a lot of Middle Eastern countries, but they're the only one that's like a legitimate ally of ours. Why would I not support them? Right? And for people that are making the claim, oh, you're only supporting them because you're a Christian. Like, why would that be a bad thing? Again, that's not my reason, but why would that be a bad thing? And the last big takeaway here is there's a reason they attacked the nuclear capabilities of Iran, but currently have not destroyed their oil infrastructure and taken out the Ayatollahs. So as we sit here right now, I'm recording this a day before it comes out, so everything could change in the next 24 hours, but the oil infrastructure is still in place and the Ayatollahs are still in place there in Iran. But my thinking, again, I'm not a geopolitical expert, but my thinking is the reason why they're not taking that out is because they don't want to bring China into this conflict. Now, there are people out there that do not think there's any way that China or Russia or North Korea or any of these other countries are going to come to Iran's aid. I think they're probably right about that. But you don't really want to test it, do you? Because if you destroy the oil infrastructure, you basically destroy the country of Iran, because that is their entire way of production, right? The overwhelming majority of their gross domestic product, and all of their exports is coming from oil. And a lot of their oil goes to China. And so we'll have to kind of see how it goes, but I am pro-Israel. I'm here for what they're doing. I hope if America gets involved, it is from air assets that are destroying some of their nuclear facilities that are underground and some of things like that, because we happen to have the only military that has the capability to destroy those things without putting boots on the ground. So let's see if that's how it goes. All right, next quick hitter here. Simone Biles getting dragged for going after Riley Gaines. Okay, so this all went down on Twitter recently, but basically there was the Minnesota State High School 4A softball championship, and there was Champlin Park, and the pitcher for Champlin Park that pitched basically the entire tournament was a boy. Okay, so this was a boy that was destroying girls in softball. Okay, this team won the Minnesota State Championship, 4A State Championship for 2025, and they posted it, and then they turned the comments off, right? Because obviously when you cheat and have a boy on the girls' team, people are probably not going to like that very much. So Riley Gaines, who's an advocate for women's sports, and everybody knows her story. She came on the show. Check out the interview that we did with her. She quote tweets that picture and says, "Comments off, LOL, to be expected when your star player is a boy," which is an incredibly reasonable take. Then enters Simone Biles, who, regardless of what she ever says or does, is the greatest female Olympic gymnast of all time. Not just American, but in total. But she quote tweets Riley Gaines and says this: "You're truly sick. All of this campaigning because you lost a race. Straight up sore loser. You should be uplifting the trans community and perhaps finding a way to make sports inclusive, or creating a new avenue where trans feel safe in sports. Maybe a transgender." So aside from the fact that some of that is not even readable because Simone Biles is apparently not that smart of a person, Simone Biles is claiming that Riley Gaines is sick for standing up for the girls that lost because they had to play against a boy in high school, right? And then she implies that she's just a sore loser. Riley Gaines, oh, you lost to a guy, or, Simone Biles will say you lost to a trans woman in the pool. Maybe you should have just been better. Maybe you should have just been born 6'4" and male, right? I know your dick in the water is a little bit of a rudder. It causes a little bit of drag, but you have some other things that kind of help you get through the water a little faster. That's Simone Biles' argument. So Riley Gaines responds, "This is actually so disappointing. It's not my job or the job of any woman to figure out how to include men in our spaces. You can uplift men stealing championships in women's sports with your platform? Men don't belong in women's sports, and I say that with my full chest." So, very good response. But apparently that wasn't enough for Simone Biles. She had to come back and she said, "Bully someone your own size," which would ironically be a male. So bully someone your own size. She's implying that Riley Gaines is bullying this team because the coaches, the administration, they're all in on it. The parents are all in on it. Hey, we're just going to cheat. We're just going to have a boy on our team because who cares, right? And then she basically body shames Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines responded, "In the subtle hint at body shaming, please, I'm 5'5". So she's like, kind of making fun of Riley Gaines' appearance. She's very athletic appearance, which Simone Biles, what an interesting person to basically do that. Now, Simone Biles got dragged for this. And it's a great thing that she did. I mean, from every corner of the internet, from the news, she got dragged for this. Yeah, there were some liberal people that were super big on it and, pro all the things that she said. But people dug up an old tweet from like 2017 where she said it would be unfair if women had to compete with men, right? Because, basically women would never be able to compete with men in gymnastics. I mean, like, just look at, there's a reason why men and women don't even do the same events in gymnastics. Like, can you imagine, like, Simone Biles having to do the rings, right? Or the pommel horse. Like, so for someone like Simone Biles, whose competition career, for all intents and purposes, is over, she just pulled the ladder up, right? There's no courage at all, because she just gets to a point, she wins all of her medals, and now she's advocating for men to compete in sports. I'm sure she would say the same about her sport, when she admitted herself that if that were the case, she would not even be a thing, right? So she did issue an apology after a few days. Simone Biles issued an apology. I'm not even going to read the apology here. I'm not going to dignify it, because if you look at how Simone Biles writes, which is basically like a teenage girl, and then you look at this thing, it was put together by a crisis PR firm, right? So they probably injected some of Simone's opinions in there, but it's basically her trying to pull back a little bit. But my big takeaway on this one is the only reason that we know Simone Biles exists, that we know Simone Biles is a thing, and that she's a mega rich superstar, is because she didn't have to compete against men. That's why. Because if we didn't have men's gymnastics and women's gymnastics, we just had gymnastics, she would not be a thing. Caitlin Clark is the biggest thing in women's basketball probably ever right now. But guess what? If there wasn't men's basketball and women's basketball, if there was just basketball, she doesn't see the court. I've seen people online, they're like, oh, what would Caitlin Clark do if she was on, the Milwaukee Bucks? Or, could she have saved the Dallas Mavericks season? No. Take the best high school basketball team from the state of Texas, and pretty much everyone on that roster is going to be better than Caitlin Clark in a basketball game, which is no shade to Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark might be the greatest female basketball player ever right now. Like, she watching her play is just incredible. But if she had to play against the men, she'd get smashed. That's just the reality of it. But someone like Simone Biles, again, this is kind of where leftism is just this rot. It just rots your brain to where it's like, I wish I could sit down with Simone Biles and like maybe draw her some pictures, get out some crayons and be like, okay, this is a boy, this is a girl. Boys are physically superior in these ways. Girls are physically superior in these ways. Here's the sport. Who do you think's going to win, Simone? Is this fair? Is this fair to girls to have to compete against boys? Is it fair for girls to sacrifice opportunities and in some cases sacrifice their health so that a gender confused boy can be in their team and play in their sport? But yeah, I think it's an incredible thing to see now, because Simone Biles doesn't get dragged if this were 5 years ago. Simone Biles would have been held up as a paragon of virtue. She would have been, allowed to speak at the DNC and, been invited to the White House and those types of things. But we live in a cultural moment now where people are finally fed up with all this transgenderism stuff. And it's like, no, we're not going to have boys and girls sports. This is dumb. This is ridiculous. We're done with the charade. All right, next quick hitter here. Hamas murdering humanitarian aid workers. This is according to Fox News on June the 12th. An unprovoked Hamas attack on Gaza humanitarian foundation workers left at least 8 people dead and many others injured. I think the death toll is higher than that now, as the U.S.-backed organization fears some team members may have been taken hostage. We carefully considered closing our sites today, given the heightened security risks and safety concerns, but we decided that the best response to Hamas's cowardly murders was to keep delivering food for the people of Gaza who are counting on us. We will not be deterred from our mission towards providing food security for the Palestinian people in Gaza, GHF Interim Executive Director John Ackery said in a statement. So I'm going to go to my big takeaway on this one. But yeah, sure. Keep explaining to me how both sides of this conflict are the same. Because, I got a DM last night. I support genocide. I support baby murder, all those types of things, because I support Israel. And I do support Israel in their fight against Iran. I support them in their fight against the Palestinians and against Hamas. I absolutely support that. Again, need I remind you, the Palestinians voted to have Hamas in power knowing that they were an Islamist jihadist group that was going to be leading their country. And so you have a group that literally their express purpose for existence is making sure Palestinians can eat food. But when Hamas is not in control of the aid, with either the money or the supplies, they don't like that very much. So they murdered the aid workers. Have you heard about this story? I mean, just imagine. Let's say somehow it were switched, right? And Israel had murdered a bunch of aid workers. Let's say it was Israel. Let's say it wasn't Hamas that killed these aid workers, but let's say this was an organization that was not affiliated with Israel, even though the country of Israel is sending in millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of supplies every single day into Palestinian areas to support these people, a lot of which are their enemies that want their destruction. But let's say Israel were to take out these aid workers, like preemptively, like before they got into the country, they just took them all out. That'd be the only news story. That and, oh, Trump said a thing. But that would be the only news story that any of us would be hearing about, would be the evil Jews killing these aid workers. But when Hamas does it, it's just par for the course. Isn't that so interesting? All right, next quick hitter here. I love this story so much. Democrats spending $20 million to try and understand young male Americans. So this is according to Politico on June the 4th. The Democrats trying to understand young American men know people are roasting their plan. All that mocking just proves their point, they said. Democrats aren't taking this disaffected and politically alienated voting bloc seriously enough. It reaffirms that young men already think that Democrats don't want to invest in you, says Elise Hogue, who co-founded the Speaking with American Men project. The group has a 2-year, $20 million budget to study young men and how Democrats can reach them. The results of the initial round of research shared exclusively with Politico, including 30 focus groups and a national media consumption survey, found many young men believe that neither party has our back, as one black man from Georgia said in the focus group. Participants described the Democratic Party as an overly scripted and cautious, while Republicans are seen as confident and unafraid to offend. Democrats are seen as weak, whereas Republicans are seen as strong, Hogue said. Young men also spoke of being invisible to the Democratic coalition, and so you've got a weak problem, and then you've got this, I don't think they care about me problem, and I think the combination is kind of a killer, okay? So the name of this program is SAM, Speaking with American Men, SAM. So I'm going to go right to my big takeaway here. I don't normally offer up help to Democrats, but I'm feeling generous. Okay? So next time, Democrats, for any of you still listening to this episode, just come to me and I can explain all of this to you in detail, and I'll even give you a discount. I'll do it for $19.5 million. Okay? So just $19.5 million, and I will help you. And this is what I'm going to tell you. Masculine men aren't liberal. Again, I'll say it slowly because I know sometimes it's hard for Democrats to understand things, so here it goes. Masculine men aren't liberal. Name me the super liberal men, the super leftist men in your life that are also very, very masculine. So Jordan Peterson has talked about this a lot because he's big on the big 5 personality traits. And the top 2 predictors of people that have liberal or progressive leftist views are 2 things. The top 2 predictors. Number 1, being female. Number 2, having a feminine temperament. So is it a shock to you that a lot of very dedicated progressive males are pretty effeminate? Yeah, yes, I'm sure some of you could find that person out there that does jujitsu and has a beard and tattoos and likes to shoot and kill animals and is like this all-around bad dude and all those types of things. And also he's a big Bernie guy, right? Or loves him some Kamala Harris, right? I'm sure those people exist. But in general, if you have liberal or progressive views, you're typically a woman and you typically have a feminine temperament. Now, you can dig into a lot of different ways of doing that, but the Democratic Party right now, you're not going to win by putting effeminate men in camo, like you tried to do with Governor Tim Walz. Okay? You're not going to win by having Pete Buttigieg, a gay guy, grow a beard, right? Those are things that you have tried or are in the process of trying. That's not going to appeal to masculine young men, right? Teenagers, young men in their 20s and 30s. That's not going to appeal to them. Because men that are not female, right? Because and men that don't have a feminine temperament, they're not drawn to leaders that are homosexuals, that are effeminate themselves, that are constantly like stepping on eggshells, not really knowing what to say, that aren't bold, that aren't brash. They're not really drawn to that. So again, keep wasting money, keep wasting the money of the people that donate to your causes, but it's actually pretty easy to see why it is this way. All right, let's get to the MLB section. So let's talk about Clayton Kershaw. So Clayton Kershaw, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, certainly one of the greatest pitchers for the Dodgers, maybe only behind Sandy Koufax, but he did a silent protest at a recent Dodgers game. So obviously in Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, it's an absolute mess over there. And boy, does that organization love them Pride Month. Okay. So they had a game against the Giants last weekend. And during Pride Month, they changed the logo of the Dodgers cap, the famous L and A in white. And then they had the Pride Progress color stripes in there, basically making the ugliest hat ever made. Right. And so this is something that all the players have to wear. And so I actually want to put up this picture of Clayton Kershaw. So I want you to look at his protest here. So you can see he's written something on his hat right there. And if you're just watching this, or just listening to this, I'll describe it. On his hat, he writes Genesis 9:12-16. It's right next to the ridiculous Los Angeles Pride flag logo. But let me go ahead and read Genesis 9:12-16 to you. And God said, "This is a sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of flesh. And all the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." So what's being described here is God saying that the rainbow is a symbol that God is not going to flood the earth and kill everybody again, right? Except for Noah's family. Okay. So my big takeaway here, I'll actually just read the comment because I posted the picture of Clayton Kershaw over the weekend, and this was my caption. There are loud and fiery, but mostly peaceful, protests going on in Los Angeles right now. But Clayton Kershaw is showing everyone that you don't have to burn cars and throw Molotov cocktails at cops to get your point across. He wrote Genesis 9:12-16 right next to the abominable Prime theme Dodgers logo. This is where we see the recording of God using the rainbow as a symbol that he will never flood the earth again. And by the way, a rainbow has 7 stripes. Roy G. Biv, remember? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But do you know how many stripes the pride flag has? 6. Everything God creates, Satan counterfeits. Bravo, Clayton. So I loved this because he could have made a big deal about it. He could have just put on the other flag, the other hat, just the regular L and the A, and then he would have been asked about it afterwards. And no matter what he would have said, he would have been castigated as a hater, as this terrible, bigoted human being. All he did is he put scripture on his hat, and in this case, and in a lot of cases, scripture was the answer. All right, next one here in the MLB section, former MLB pitcher and Cy Young winner Trevor Bauer winning his defamation lawsuit against a woman that accused him of rape. So this is according to Fox News on October the 2nd. Trevor Bauer, a former Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher who won the National League Cy Young Award in 2020, and a woman who accused him of beating and sexually assaulting her in 2021 have settled their legal dispute, his attorney said Monday. Trevor Bauer and Lindsey Hill have settled all outstanding litigation, John Federoff and Sean Hawley, Bauer's attorney, said in a statement. Both of their respective claims have been withdrawn with prejudice, effective today. Mr. Bauer did not make and never has made any payments to Ms. Hill, including to resolve their litigation. With this matter now at rest, Mr. Bauer can focus completely on baseball. The 32-year-old adamantly denied the allegations against him throughout the entire process. He was placed on administrative leave by Major League Baseball in July of 2021 after the initial allegations were made. The woman accused Bauer of assaulting her on 2 different occasions at his home in Pasadena, California, during what she said began as consensual sexual encounters. Bauer maintained the encounters were consensual. Prosecutors declined to file charges in the case. So I've talked about this before on this podcast, how this woman who was basically sending these crazy sexual DMs to Trevor Bauer, and Trevor Bauer bit on it, and they apparently had wild, crazy, consensual sex, and then she later claimed rape. Yeah, stop me if you've heard a story like this before. And the prosecutors would have loved to have had his scalp, right? But there was simply zero evidence that this woman was sexually assaulted. Zero. Again, tell me if you've heard that before. But let me go to my big takeaways here. I have several. Yes, obviously, if Trevor Bauer had a biblical sexual ethic, this never would have happened. Okay? The last 4 years of his career have been deleted, which would have been core years where millions of dollars would have been made in potentially more Cy Youngs and more accolades. If he had a biblical sexual ethic, he never would have engaged with this woman. So that is true. But unfortunately for Trevor Bauer, I think his Major League Baseball career is likely over. Because Trevor Bauer, first of all, did not do himself any favors because apparently he was a weirdo. He was a very hard person to manage, very hard person to coach, had said some things in the media, just not a great teammate overall, just a tremendously talented pitcher. But This is one of those things that even though he's been exonerated, because they dropped the charges a long time ago, and not a single MLB team even gave him an invite to spring training, signed him to a minor league deal. He's been pitching in Mexico and the Caribbean and doing different things on like TikTok and things like that. But for one of this generation's better elite pitchers, his career is probably over, right? So again, if he had not engaged in the sexual act with this woman, this never would have happened. But I'm going to go to his accuser here. His accuser should be in prison right now, right? This woman, as so many women have done across history, claimed sexual assault that never happened. This was her plan from the beginning. If you go back to her initial text messages and messages she was sending with her friends, she was trying to get a bag from Trevor Bauer, because this is a woman, a whore, that has apparently no skills, has no job prospects. And so her job is, I'm going to be hot. I'm going to do crazy things sexually in bed. I'm going to later claim sexual assault, and then I'm going to get paid. And I'm never going to have to work again, right? And so she'll be a whore still, but she'll be in a mansion, driving a nice car. But she should be in prison. Like, I am a huge fan, as if you falsely accuse, specifically and especially of rape, if you falsely accuse somebody of sexual assault and it's found out that you're lying, you should get the sentence that that person would have gotten. Okay, so let's say Trevor Bauer did rape her, right? And Trevor Bauer was convicted. They had the evidence and he was put in prison for, 25 years or something like that. In this case, she should get 25 years in prison for faking it. I don't really see the argument against it. And my last quick hitter on this one is, guys, whores can ruin your life, okay? It's best to avoid them. Some of you guys listening to this, you're single. And you got some gals out there that are ready to go, right? And if they're ready to go with you and they just met you, this probably isn't their first rodeo, okay? And you talk to men who have married whores, deeply problematic, okay? Because if they've acted that way in their life, they're probably going to continue acting that way. Again, the gospel can change people from the inside out and all those different things. But for a lot of you guys, you're out there looking for whores. You're looking for an easy lay. You're looking for somebody that maybe you can put a ring on it and then they'll be a whore, but just like in your house as a as a married man or something like that. But how does this ever work out that way? Guys, just avoid them altogether. And you know what one looks like, right? You know what one acts like. Just avoid them. All right, last MLB story here. Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson being reinstated in Major League Baseball. This is according to ESPN on May the 13th. In a historic sweeping decision, Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred on Tuesday removed Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and other deceased players from Major League Baseball's permanently ineligible list. The all-time hit king and Jackson, both longtime baseball pariahs stained by gambling, seen by MLB as the game's mortal sin, are now eligible for election to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. Manfred ruled that MLB's punishment of banned individuals ends upon their deaths. Okay, so with Shoeless Joe Jackson, if we go back to his thing, there was the Black Sox scandal where these players got together and they were coming together to basically fix the World Series. But if you look at the stats for Shoeless Joe Jackson in the World Series, it didn't really look like a guy that was trying to throw the World Series, but apparently he did accept money. He got a lifetime ban along with everybody else as part of the Black Sox scandal. Then you have Pete Rose, who 100% bet on baseball while he was playing it. And while he was manager, there's good evidence that he bet on the Cincinnati Reds while he was doing that. That was MLB's big time, like, oh, big no, we can't have any gambling. But my big takeaway on this one is the ubiquity of gambling might destroy sports as we know it. Because it's so rich, and a lot of people point this out. I'm not the first one. Pete Rose is lifetime ban, right? His life is now over because he's passed away. Lifetime ban from the sport of baseball. And now there's just gambling all over sports, including baseball. Like, Pete Rose came out and said, look, they banned me for what they're basically encouraging all the fans to do. Now, they're still trying to make sure that players don't do it. But guys, we're already seeing stories. There was a guy in the NBA that got banned for life because he was like a bench player for the Rockets or something like that. He was betting on games that he was playing in. With the ubiquity of gambling and with the amount of money that is changing hands because of gambling, how do you expect players not to get involved? Players are super competitive. Players want to get after it at all times for all reasons. And you think they're not going to bet on themselves? Right? I mean, we see it's differently like in MMA and in boxing and things like that. You'll got Floyd Mayweather. He'll put a $5 million bet on himself for a fight or something like that. But in the sport like baseball and in team sports, You'll have guys that are trying to affect the outcomes with like these prop bets. It's not just winning and losing and plus minus or the over under. They're betting like which team's going to get the first rebound and which team which player is going to miss the second shot and like things like that. And so the ubiquity of gambling, and just for guys in my audience, I know a lot of guys in my audience are probably drawn to sports gambling or want to do that. Guys, just like whores, leave this alone too, because you're never going to get it back. Like you're chasing these dreams and you think you know a lot about sports and things go on. And so you keep putting money out there. I had a guy message me a while ago, man, I'm addicted to sports gambling. What should I do? I'm like, I don't know. Delete all your sports gambling apps to where you can't do it anymore. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the easiest thing in the world to just stop doing. This guy didn't live in Vegas. He didn't work in a casino. He just had apps on his phone that was destroying his life and bank account, right? This isn't like alcohol where every restaurant you go to on the planet has a bar, right? So you're constantly met with this temptation, right? This is an app on your phone. Delete the app, right? This isn't that hard. All right, last quick hitter here. Michael Tait of Newsboys confessing to being an alcoholic, druggy, homosexual. So let's talk about Newsboys a little bit. I know they've been around for a very, very long time. I remember my buddy in like elementary school getting their album. I cannot name you a single Newsboys song. I know, like I can hum one. It's like, I'm coming up, I'm something, da da da. Like, I don't know anything about Newsboys, okay? I didn't know Michael Tait's name. I recognize them if I saw them on a picture, but I don't really know them, so no connection to Newsboys whatsoever. But this is according to Michael Tait himself on Instagram on June the 10th. And before this came out, there was a bunch of reports that came out about some of the things that he ended up admitting to. So let's go to Michael Tait's post. Recent reports of my reckless and destructive behavior, including drug and alcohol abuse and sexual activity, are sadly largely true. For some 2 decades, I used and abused cocaine, consumed far too much alcohol, and at times touched men in an unwanted, sensual way. I'm ashamed of my life choices and actions and make no excuses for them. I will simply call it what God calls it, sin. I don't blame anyone or anything but myself. While I might dispute certain details in the accusations against me, I do not dispute the substance of them. Okay, so again, this is a thing he likely didn't write. It's probably written by another organization, all those types of things. But he is taking responsibility for this. But again, you have to remember he's taking responsibility for this because he got caught. Because the substance of the allegations that were put out publicly were substantive to begin with. And so I don't really give people points for apologizing for something after they've been caught. Like, you're not actually sorry. You're sorry you got caught, because had he not gotten caught, he would still apparently be drinking to excess, doing cocaine, and, fondling men, having sex with men or whatever. So my big takeaway on this one, I'm always looking for opportunities, not to dunk on these men, but to help you guys out. Don't put your faith in men. Don't put your faith in any man. Not your favorite artist, favorite singer, not your favorite podcaster, not your favorite pastor, not your favorite athlete, not your favorite politician. They will always let you down. Again, I always go back to Ravi Zacharias. Let's say you got saved at a Ravi Zacharias International Ministries event, and then you find out after his death that he was a sexual deviant. And now you feel like, well, wait a minute, am I saved? You're having an attack of faith because you don't really understand what's going on. It's because, in a way, you put your faith in Ravi Zacharias and his words and philosophies, and not in Jesus, not in the cross of Christ, not in the payment that was made for you on Golgotha, right? Please, under no circumstances, put your faith in men. They will always and forever let you down, but Jesus will not. All right, and that'll do it for today's episode. Guys, it was a long one, but we're really, really glad you were here for it. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. Our mission at Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Got a link to our donation page. Again, guys, apply for Dominion. That link is there too. Couple of dozen tickets left for the Church 1122 Men's Conference, and then everything else I talked about in the main episode and the quick hitters. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.